Welcome to my channel, The Good Boo Tales. In today's video, we begin a powerful new story, Manna in the Wilderness. Before you skip ahead, let me ask you something. What would you do if everything you once trusted, everything you built your life on, suddenly vanished overnight? If you were stranded, physically, emotionally, spiritually, with nothing familiar in sight, how would you survive? How would you find hope? This story isn't just about surviving a desert. It's about the spiritual deserts we all walk through at some point. Loneliness, betrayal, uncertainty, and the unexpected places where life shows up, even when everything feels lost. It all begins with a man named Elior, a quiet, thoughtful figure in his early 40s. He once had everything, a good job, a warm home, a tight-knit family. But that was before the silence came. Not just silence of sound, but silence of direction. One by one, his certainties unraveled. First, his job disappeared. Then, his father, his mentor, passed suddenly. And finally, his own faith, which had once been like a strong current guiding him, began to feel distant, unreachable. One evening, while packing up his belongings from a house he could no longer afford, Elior found a dusty old journal written by his grandfather, an explorer and a man of deep faith. Inside, it spoke of a journey, a physical wilderness trek he had taken as a young man during a crisis of his own. He called it, "The place where manna still falls." A phrase that meant little to Elior at first, but the words tugged at something deep in him, something ancient and unspoken. Without fully knowing why, Elior decided to follow in his grandfather's footsteps, not to escape his life, but to face it, stripped of comfort and distraction. With nothing but a backpack, a water bottle, and his grandfather's journal, he walked into the desert. No GPS, no clear destination, just blind trust that there was something worth finding out there. But the wilderness is never just sand and sky. It's mirrors. It reflects what we don't want to see. And what Elior finds in those empty places is far more than he bargained for. Strange signs, whispered voices, symbols scratched into stone that eerily match those in the journal. And most haunting of all, dreams of a child he's never met, calling his name from somewhere just out of reach. As the sun scorches overhead and nights stretch longer than they should, the line between memory and vision starts to blur. Is Elior losing his grip, or waking up to something bigger than himself? What is the true meaning of manna in the wilderness? Is it food, hope, or something else entirely? And then, just when he's ready to turn back, he hears it. A voice, low and familiar, calling from deep within the canyon. You were never alone. But who said it? And how do they know his name? Stay with me, because this is just the beginning of Elior's journey. The wilderness has secrets, and some of them are watching. Elior froze. The canyon around him was empty, quiet, too quiet. The wind had stopped, the birds were gone, and the voice, so clear, so direct, still echoed faintly in his ears. He turned slowly, eyes scanning the jagged walls around him. Nothing, no one, just red rocks, scattered shadows, and that unbearable silence again. But deep down, something had shifted. Whoever, or whatever, that voice belonged to. It knew him. He tightened the straps on his backpack and kept moving, the sun now lower in the sky, throwing long shadows across the dusty path. Each step kicked up little clouds of sand, the only sound breaking the stillness. But inside, his mind was racing. How could anyone be out here? He hadn't seen another soul in 3 days, not since he passed the broken sign at the edge of the old mining road. Not since he crossed into this place his grandfather only called the dry lands of waking. The journal had been vague, frustratingly so. Its pages were full of poetic language, half-thoughts, and symbols he still didn't fully understand. But Elior remembered one thing clearly. His grandfather had written, "The wilderness does not feed the body. It feeds the soul, but it takes everything first." It was starting to make sense now. The physical hunger, the aching muscles, the sleepless nights, all stripping away the surface, leaving him raw, exposed. And yet, the deeper he went, the more he started to feel watched. Not in a threatening way, more like something was studying him, waiting. He thought about the dreams again. The little girl. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old, always barefoot, always standing at a distance, never speaking, just holding out her hand. The same hand, night after night. But last night, something had changed. She had whispered a name. Not his, a different one. Ashara. It didn't mean anything to him, but he wrote it down. He felt like it would matter later. As the sun dipped below the rocks and darkness began to stretch across the canyon floor, Elior finally stopped to rest. He lit a small fire, more for comfort than warmth. The stars came out slowly, blinking one by one into the sky like old memories returning. He opened the journal again, flipping back to the page where the ink had smudged, like it had been wet when it was written. Just 5 words. "You will know the sign." That was it. No date, no explanation. But as the fire crackled and shadows danced across the canyon walls, he felt it again. Eyes, watching, closer this time. And then, something moved behind the rocks. Elior didn't move. His breath caught in his throat as the sound of shifting gravel came again. Slow, deliberate, just beyond the edge of the firelight. He squinted into the dark, heart pounding. Was it an animal, a person, or something else? He reached for a nearby branch, his only defense, and waited. But nothing came out. The shadows held their secrets. Sleep never came that night. Only questions. Why was he really here? Was it just about following his grandfather's path? Or was something else pulling him forward? Ever since he entered the canyon, strange patterns had started to appear. In the shape of the rocks, in the movement of the wind, even in the way birds flew overhead. All of it felt intentional, like this place was alive in ways the outside world never was. Back home, people had thought Elior was unraveling. After his father died, he stopped going to work. He'd sit for hours in the garden, staring at nothing. Some said he was grieving, others whispered about depression, but none of them knew the truth, that something inside him had broken, and the noise of modern life only made it worse. He wasn't looking for healing anymore. He was looking for meaning. And now, in this wilderness, surrounded by silence and ancient stone, he was starting to find pieces of something bigger, something hidden. What he didn't know yet was that he wasn't the only one drawn to this place. Miles away, a woman named Leora was crossing into the same region, guided by a dream she'd had 3 nights in a row. A dream of a man trapped between 2 worlds. She didn't know his name, but she felt his fear. And as her footsteps echoed into the dry earth, something unseen began to stir beneath them both. The next morning, the canyon air felt heavier, like something was pressing down on it. Elior moved slowly, body aching, eyes scanning every shadow. The journal stayed clutched in his hand. He had barely eaten. He couldn't remember the last time he truly slept. But something deeper than hunger was driving him now. The strange symbols he had seen carved into stone walls were beginning to repeat. Spirals within spirals, circles broken at one edge. He found another one that morning, half buried under sand. But this time, something was different. Fresh footprints. Not his. He crouched beside them, heart thudding. They were small, bare, like a child's. The image of the girl flashed in his mind. The one from the dreams. Was she real? Or was his mind breaking from the heat and silence? He didn't have answers, only questions that kept piling up. And far off, maybe half a mile away, Leora stood on a narrow ridge overlooking the canyon below. Her map was useless now. The land didn't match anything on paper, but the symbols she had seen in her dreams were here, etched into real rock. The same patterns Elior had found. She traced her fingers along one, then paused. Voices, echoes rising with the wind. Not words, but tones, like a song too ancient to remember. As the sun dropped lower and shadows stretched longer, both of them, Elior and Leora, began to feel it. The earth beneath them seemed to hum, barely noticeable at first, like a distant vibration under their feet. The same word repeated silently in their thoughts. Ashara. It pulsed like a heartbeat through the canyon. Then, just as the last light of day disappeared, a sharp cry cut through the air. Not human, not animal, something in between. Elior turned toward the sound, eyes wide, just as the ground beneath him cracked. Elior stumbled backward as the ground beneath him cracked open, a jagged line splitting the canyon floor. Dust shot up in a sudden burst, choking the air. He dropped to one knee, coughing, eyes stinging, trying to see through the cloud. But then he saw it, just for a second. A staircase, not carved by erosion or time, but shaped by human hands, descending deep beneath the surface. And at the top step, a small handprint, the same size as the girl's from his dreams. He didn't have time to process it. From behind, that sound came again. Low, throaty, unearthly. It vibrated through the stone, through his bones. He turned, half expecting a wild animal, but what stood there was worse. A figure, cloaked in what looked like faded ceremonial cloth, face hidden by a dark veil, unmoving. Elior couldn't breathe. The figure raised one hand and pointed, not at him, but at the staircase. Then it vanished. No footsteps, no sound. Just gone. At the same time, Leora was scrambling down a different ridge, drawn by the same cry. Her hands were scraped, her lips cracked from the dry air, but she didn't stop. Something was calling to her, pulling her deeper into the land. She reached a clearing surrounded by stone markers. Each one had symbols etched into them, some matching those in her dreams, others unfamiliar. But one stood out, a tall flat slab with two names, Elior and Ashara, side by side. Her blood ran cold. She didn't know who Elior was, at least not yet, but seeing his name written in a place no modern hand could have reached made her question everything. The dreams weren't just dreams. They were warnings. Back in the canyon, Elior finally stepped onto the first stair, and immediately the temperature dropped. The sunlight above flickered, just like a flame about to die. Below, he could see faint light pulsing, a dull, rhythmic glow, and then a voice, this time not from behind but inside him. Calm, clear, familiar. You weren't supposed to find this alone. He froze. He knew that voice. It was his father's. And then, the light below turned blood red. Elior hesitated at the top of the staircase, heart hammering in his chest. His father's voice, soft, calm, unmistakable, echoed again in his mind. You weren't supposed to find this alone. But what did that mean? Before he could answer the question, the red light below began to pulse faster, almost like it was alive, responding to his thoughts. Against every instinct in his body, he stepped deeper into the earth, drawn by something he still didn't understand. Each step took him further from the world he knew. The stone walls were smooth now, etched with glowing symbols that lit as he passed. The air was heavy, but not stale. It smelled faintly of ash and wildflowers, like life and death, mixed into one. At the bottom of the stairs, he reached a wide chamber. At its center stood a stone table, and on it, a small glowing orb. Inside the orb, a scene played out like a memory, a child wandering alone in the desert, the same girl from his dreams. Elior stepped closer, and the image inside the orb shifted. Now it showed two children, one with his face, the other with hers. A voice rose from the walls, different now, feminine, full of sorrow. Ashara was your sister, lost before you were born. This place remembers what the world forgets. He staggered back. His parents had never spoken of another child. Could it be true? Was this what had pulled him here all along? Suddenly the chamber shook, and the figure in the veil reappeared, now beside the orb. Slowly it removed the veil, revealing his own face. A perfect reflection, but older, weathered, wounded. This is the path you walk if you don't choose. In that moment, Leora appeared at the chamber entrance, breathless, eyes wide with disbelief. She looked at Elior, then at the figure. Her voice cracked. You saw it too? He nodded. The orb pulsed again, brighter now. Symbols on the walls began to glow violently. The chamber shook harder. Elior reached out to the orb. Everything went white. Then silence. When Elior opened his eyes, he was standing in the canyon again, sun above, the crack in the earth now gone. The journal was still in his hand, but Leora was gone, and so was the name Ashara from the pages, except for one last line at the bottom. You brought the manna back. And below it, freshly written, but something else came with it. Elior stood in the canyon, the wind brushing against his skin like a soft reminder that the world was real again. The sun was high now, casting long, warm light across the stones. But everything felt different. Lighter, quieter, not in the way that made him feel alone, but like something heavy had been lifted from the land itself. He looked down at the journal, thumbing through the pages that had once been filled with confusion and fragments. The symbols were gone. The name Ashara erased, except in his memory. But the final message stayed. You brought the manna back. He didn't fully understand what it meant, but he felt it. Something sacred had been returned. Not food, not treasure, but memory, healing. The wilderness hadn't just stripped him down. It had given something back in return. A truth his family had buried, maybe out of pain. A sister lost before she had a name in the world, still echoing in the land that remembered everything. Elior turned slowly, eyes scanning the horizon. Leora was gone, but he could still feel her presence, like she had played her part in something bigger, and then stepped back into the dream she came from. Maybe they'd meet again, or maybe her path was only meant to cross his for that moment. He didn't know, but he no longer feared the unknown. As he walked toward the edge of the canyon, the cracked earth beneath his feet now firm, he noticed something new growing from the stone, a single green sprout pushing through dust and rock. Life where none should be. He smiled. That was the manna, not a miracle from the sky, but hope found in the hardest places. By the time he reached the road where his journey had started, he knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something else. He had stories to tell, truths to uncover, and maybe, for the first time in a long time, something worth living for. Not just surviving. So if you ever find yourself lost in your own wilderness, unsure of where to go or what to believe, remember this. The desert doesn't take everything. Sometimes it gives back what you didn't know you'd lost. And sometimes the manna still falls.